What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Down in Front. Here today is episode 3, and sport's been decent on the first two episodes. We'll see how it we keep building up this series as we record more episodes. Today we are going to be talking a lot about the Iron Claw and A24. But before we do get to that, we're going to run down some news in the movie world. If you are new, make sure to subscribe. Like we record every a new episode every week. We might pick that up if it starts to we start to kind of build momentum. We haven't really decided that yet, but we will move on to the news. This weekend, Cuckoo releases, guys, the original horror movie. It does look like a very fun movie. I believe Hunter Schafer is
Tony
the
Schaefer's
star,
the lead.
is the lead in that movie. It is looking like a very fun horror, a body horror, which is something that we don't really see a lot of these days.
A
But
lot more coming out. Just Skincare's a body horror coming out. There's a
yeah,
Demi Moore movie that's body horror that just started shooting. So that's starting to pick up a little bit.
but it's been a while. Like we had Smile, which in a way was a bit of a body horror, but not really anything that I could think of outside of that.
A
But
sequel this year.
yeah, which is I'm gonna probably have nightmares about again. But anyway, we move on to the next bit of news. Beetlejuice is selling really well. Beetlejuice 2, a sequel that is 20 odd years in the making now.
40.
40 years in the making.
That
Okay,
movie's
yeah.
from the
I,
80s,
I
brother.
feel way that makes me feel a little bit older because I remember watching that movie when I was a kid.
That movie
But
came out in 88, brother. It's
oh god. But that movie is selling very well, as we kind of predict over the last few weeks, because it is a familiar IP to a lot of people. And speaking of familiar IPs, Borderlands, the movie that we talked about Borderlands quite a bit in the last few 2 weeks. We've said how it's not an original IP. It'll probably do well at the box office, but critically, it has been panned now that the embargo has been lifted. It has a 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which is
for
crazy.
Kate Blanchett.
And yeah, we did say that one of the plus sides was the cast, but a lot of the critics have said that the acting is, let's say, not up to standard with what the usual of the cast put out there. But that could be due to a bad script. We don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Jamie, though, is the unlucky soul that is going to go see it tonight. So, what are you thinking about it now, Jamie? Are you worried? Are you excited? Are
I'm
you
even more excited. I knew it was going to be bad.
hopefully it's the kind of bad that you can kind of just laugh along with, and it's a bit campy, it's a bit silly, and maybe that's the reason why it's been panned. But
I
we
also
won't
have
know.
I have no frame of reference for that specific
Yeah.
video game.
Hmm.
So that'll probably help my enjoyment too.
Yeah. And speaking of movies that are helped by previous experience of the story, we're going to be talking a lot about the Iron Claw today and A24. A24 have an extensive library in movie, guys, over 100 movies at this point, probably closer to 200 if we're being completely honest, when you count what's in production now. But they've been kind of a breakout studio, and probably most notably in recent years, as one of the few studios that were allowed to continue shooting during the recent writers and actors strike. So if you want to kind of ground base for how important they are to the industry at this point in time, all you got to do is look at that example. Really, if I think you might not agree with that as much as me, Jamie, but it is definitely a significant point to note when we are going to be talking
They
about them.
they're not only one of the biggest independent studios, they have a business valuation or market share valuation currently valued at 2.5 billion.
Yeah,
No independent studio in the history of cinema has ever had a market share
close,
that high.
even close, I imagine.
But that's a combination of how they do their budgets, which we'll get into at the end of the show,
Yeah,
how they've built their critic rapport. You can tell with the Oscars. Like Brendan Fraser saw his career resurgence with The Whale that won him his Oscar, A24. Jamie Lee Curtis, Keho Kwan, their resurgences and their Academy Awards came from Michelle Yeoh got one from the movie too. Everywhere, Everything All at Once. Brie Larson in Room, Mahershala Ali in Moonlight. I feel like there's one I'm missing, but
the likes of Saoirse Ronan and Lady Bird, just
I
those
was
kind of
I
roles.
wasn't going specifically for nominations because then you get
Oh,
into Florence Pugh Then you
Yeah.
get into all those different things. But they've been racking up. The Rock signed on to do the Smashing Machine,
I
partly
forgot
to
about that.
change his, because A24 has done such a good job at changing how we view certain actors
Yeah.
whose stick may be a little tired. Adam Sandler with Uncut Gems is a big,
Very
big.
good example. Yeah.
People didn't realize Adam Sandler is a pretty good dramatic actor, and now those are primarily the roles he's getting.
Hmm.
He's still doing his Happy Madison production,
Can't
whatever.
you?
But
Happy Gilmore sequels is coming out soon, so like he's still like, if that's
he's
not a
still getting his
testament,
Netflix money, but
yeah.
he's diversifying quite a bit.
Mm.
That seems to be a trend among actors. One very noticeable actor who changed their reputation in the past year, from High School Musical, good looking kid, 17 again,
Yeah,
kind of typecast as the pretty boy persona,
yeah. It's Mr. Zac Efron.
Zach Efron, who played Kevin Von Erich,
Yep.
and playing the brother Kerry Von Erich was why can't I think of his Jeremy Allen White, currently starring in The Bear on Disney, the biggest show on television. But Jeremy Allen White hadn't necessarily gotten his huge break uh, since Shameless went off air,
Yep.
and has seemed to be making the jump to Hollywood through the Iron Claw. So that's interesting. There's a lot to talk about this movie. So why don't you dig in with your thoughts first, and then I'll jump in after.
See, we've seen good wrestling movies before. The Wrestler is a fantastic movie. Mickey Rourke as the Ram, just an absolutely fantastic flick. It's wrestling is kind of the background in that movie, though. In this movie, wrestling is the core, and we're, as a heart, me and Jamie, guys, if you're not aware, if you found this and you're not a wrestling fan through following me on Twitter or so on, we are big wrestling fans. We
Just as
have
soon
been
as
pretty
they
much our
follow
whole,
him,
yeah. But
shame.
we've been wrestling fans our whole lives. We went into this movie very aware of the Von Erich story and the curse and everything like that, and we it didn't change, for me at least. It did not change in the slightest. I feel how I enjoyed the movie. I thought that the movie was a very raw retelling, and it says a lot about the tragedy of the Von Erichs that they had to cut a brother out of the movie entirely. Because if they didn't, it would have just been too much. It would have been too much for an audience to handle. And my girlfriend went to see this movie, and I explained this to Jamie at the time. She had no idea about the Von Erich story. She saw that it was about wrestling. She saw that I was excited. She's like, "Oh, okay, we're gonna watch that." That movie absolutely broke that woman. That movie broke that woman. She was a mess after. She saw it was a Zac Efron movie and all that. She was happy to go see it,
Isn't
but
that her favorite actor?
one of her favorite actors, I
What a
believe.
weird choice.
I
Kind of
don't know.
inspired though. He's cool.
I don't know. But that kind of really rawness is something that's kind of a testament to A24 in general. Like that's not just in the Iron Claw. It's with
The
every single one of their movies, in my opinion. And you mentioned it before, but movies like the Iron Claw, movies like I'm trying to struggle for
Moonlight.
other
Oh,
sports
I thought
movies
you were going with
produced
Greek.
by
Never mind.
by
Sports
A24.
movies.
Yeah, it makes
Yeah.
me
Do they have any other sports movies? I
I
don't think the
can't
studio does.
I can't. But either way, the Iron Claw as a whole makes me very hopeful for the Smashing Machine. Now you're not as familiar with the story behind
I saw
that
Emily
movie.
Blunt's in it, and I was sold.
Yeah, but you don't know the story of Mark Kerr, do you?
I know it a little bit, but I'm not overly familiar with it.
I also want to say, if you haven't seen the shots of Dwayne Johnson in makeup and everything, and such, to look like Mark Kerr, he looks nothing like himself. This is this is probably one of the biggest risks he's taken in his career. He's starring in a movie where he has actively been all his face has been all like we see so much about actors in movies and TV shows who, where they're playing a character that has to wear a mask or a helmet, they find ways around it. You can't really find ways around heavy makeup to change the way you look. And for someone who
Mm.
sells his movies based on his face, his name value, like The Rock, it is just a massive risk for him. A24 are producing that movie.
That's a different discussion for a different episode.
Yeah, but
But
I just wanted to
if you
highlight.
if you're selling a movie on your name value and changing your look changes your name value, maybe your name isn't as
Yeah,
huge as people say.
I agree. But that, and again, we can go into that topic another day. But I want to circle it back to the Iron Claw. The Iron Claw is a very, very raw look at behind the scenes of wrestling and the territory days in wrestling in general. They didn't shy away from any of the tough parts, the suicides, the deaths, the untimely deaths, the accidents, the curse in general, the just the grief that Zac Efron portrayed as Kevin Von Erich. It gives you hope for movies like The Smashing Machine, which Mark Kerr's story is a very dark story in a similar vein. In not to that extent, but it is a dark story to go down. So it makes me hopeful for that. But circling back to the Iron Claw in general, like you said, Zac Efron broke his typecast. Zac Efron not being nominated for any major award off the back of the Iron Claw
We'll go into that in a second.
is a damn shame. But the movie in general is fantastic. I don't really have any notes on the movie. I feel like the movie is a perfect adaptation of like a very, very sad and tragic story. And I think that they were right in leaving out the additional brother. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but it's a very sad movie, but it doesn't go too far, if you get me.
I do. The Chris Von Erich needed to be left out. I don't think. God rest his soul. I'm not trying to be disrespectful here. I don't think an addition of Chris Von Erich adds anything to the movie they were trying to tell. Honestly, I think it would take away. I think it would mess up the pacing. I'm fine with the way they did it. I have complaints about the timeline being jumbled, and like when Kerry Von Erich wins the IC title, for example, is out of place in the actual timeline.
Yeah.
But those are small, nerdy, nitpicky, and when you get down to the gritty, that kind of complaint, especially when you're talking as a moviegoer, not as a wrestling fan, it's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
For me, the Iron Claw is exactly what A24 is, and I agree that Zac Efron should have been nominated. I think the way his body acting was on another level in such a physically demanding role, because you can talk about his portrayal of grief, and it was exceptional. Though I don't think it was the best in that movie. I'll get to that in a second. It was exceptional, but the way he had to transform his body, the way he had to learn how to wrestle at least a little bit, and Jeremy White talks about in interviews since. That's such a completely different way of acting and on a physical level than anything they've ever had to do. And I'm sorry, that was a better performance than Bradley Cooper and Maestro, which got nominated. The nominees last year were Jamadi for Holdovers. That absolutely was right for the nominated. Murphy and Oppenheimer right for the nominated. Maestro, Cooper shouldn't have been nominated at all. Shouldn't have been close. Then it was Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction. I could see that. Yeah, I'm keeping Jeffrey Wright in there. Coleman Domingo and Rustin. Coleman Domingo for his A24 movie this year, Sing Sing. I said last week should not only be nominated but win. Coleman Domingo shouldn't have been nominated last year over Zac Efron either. And of course, no disrespect to Domingo or Cooper, who are tremendous actors. They just want better performances. The issue is Sean Durkin the director missed the deadlines for festivals. And when you're getting big movies coming out of festivals, that's pretty much what drives your award buzz. So missing that kind of screwed over the actors a little bit.
Yeah.
Plus, A24 was pushing other movies. Their big Oscar campaigns for last year were what? Past Lives, Zone of Interest, a couple other movies. They weren't exactly pushing Iron Claw because they had other big awards contenders. Not that any of them necessarily did much. But A24, I mentioned it before the show. Every movie is kind of like a psychological horror for their movies.
Yeah.
And I told you I was going to tie it in. Obviously, Hereditary. Obviously, the Goth trilogy. The actual Talk to Me, Love Lies Bleeding. Actual I Saw the TV Glow did a great job of. I wasn't a fan of the movie. I thought I Saw the TV Glow. The dialogue was poor. I thought Justice Smith wasn't very good. I thought it had the weirdest time jump I've ever seen for an actor change. But what they were trying to do, the message of the movie was very sound, very good, and execution for me just didn't work. Other than those horror movies, Lady Bird is about grief, about the grief of leaving home when you don't want to, but you know you have to. Moonlight is about the grief people go through. Last Black Man in San Francisco was a film about grief. All of these, Tuesday, the movie that came out this year starring Julia Dreyfus, was the grief of losing your daughter and what you would go through losing your daughter to cancer and knowing she's about to die. Like, all of their movies show you the horror of everyday life with a different, unique spin on that for their characters. Midsommar, the grief of a parent's passing, grief of losing a parent. I think that the way they portray grief, I think we have to talk about Maura Tierney.
Yeah.
And specifically, this is a performance I want to hit on for the Iron Claw. Maura Tierney plays the wife of Fritz.
Yeah.
When the first death happens, she breaks down and bawls. When the final death happens, goes right through her. She just swallows, stands up, holds herself straight up, puts on the performance of grieving mother.
Yeah.
She had grown so accustomed to the loss of a child that it was just another day for her, a day in her life.
Yeah.
And I think the way that Maura Tierney delicately performed this evoked so much emotion and strengthened it so much. The difference between the first funeral where you can tell it's killing her to keep up the family images, she can't bear to do it a second time. And then the next time when she's used to it, it's just incredible. And I think it's a credit to her as an actress that she was able to two very different, distinct moments of grief based on the experience that the character goes through. And I think that went understated because of Efron's performance.
Yeah.
And because of the issues that Jeremy White portrayed with Carrie and stuff like that. And Holt McCanney's performance. All of these different things. It was one of the best acted movies I've ever seen. And I think that left Maura Tierney in the backdrop.
Yeah.
But I also want to say that the script did a tremendous job following the perspective of Kevin over time, as it changed from like a more traditional mentality to realizing what's not okay and the cause of the tragedies. So the wrestling is a backdrop,
Yeah.
because wrestling is a great movie backdrop. I'm surprised we don't see more of because I think it's an inherently movie backdrop.
Yeah.
The um, live aspect of there's a theater aspect within pro wrestling
Yeah.
that gives it stars and the stories a built-in movie match. But this movie focused on the details of wrestling, the footwork Carey discusses, for example,
Yeah.
the scene where Mike is training, the obviously guys like Ryan Nemeth and Max Friedman and I think Chavo Guerrero um, helped a lot with making sure it was uh, depictioned accurately.
Yeah.
But that's just a backdrop because the change and dynamic of Kevin and how he responds to things over time explores the complexity of a grief, family, fatherhood, brotherhood, life, the pressure of the time period of the 1970s versus what it is today, among
Yeah.
other things that tackles from the perspective of the only person who was strong enough and smart enough to survive all of it.
Yeah.
And I
It's
think that's the story they found. And that's why it worked with a traditional audience versus more of a niche pro wrestling audience. Like, obviously, you're always going to get the people who turn on TBS on Wednesday nights
yeah.
and watch Pentagon Jr. But that movie did numbers beyond wrestling fans.
Yeah. It was. I'm glad you brought up the other actors in the movie because it was such a case that it wasn't just Efron, it wasn't just Jeremy Allen White. Like you said, it was everyone. It was the entire cast. Was just well, not the entire cast. I
The
think
Ric
when I
Flair
say
guy.
yeah, I think once I say that, every single wrestling fan at the exact same time goes Ric Flair guy. So that
They
was
should have just gotten the Ric Flair impersonator from Southpaw Regional Wrestling.
they should have just got literally Rick himself and just had him be like completely aged and everything. Don't even bother with CGI, and he'd probably still do a better job.
Like that bit in Seinfeld where George's dad, Jerry Stiller goes back in time to the war, and he's supposed to be 20, and he still looks 65,
Yeah,
and that's part of the joke.
yeah. That's like see. I think, and you highlighted it there as well with the parents more than anything. And Holt McCallany, I think, is without Holt, I don't think the movie would have been as well presented because it gives you someone to root against. That
I think
movie does Holt no favors in painting him as
you mean Fritz.
Holt. So yeah, Fritz in general. Sorry, Holt. If Holt, I'm sure, is a very nice guy. Anyway, Fritz is the villain. He is the bad guy
Right.
in that movie. You can't see the tragedy and the curse, so you need something to focus that on. You need something physical to blame. Fritz is that character. They set him up
Fritz is
in practically the cold open of the movie. The opening scene of the movie, it shows his determination, his desperation, his desire to not only make a living wrestling but make a fortune wrestling. That's
Zac
his.
Efron is the lead because you need someone to root for, not
Yeah,
because the movie is about Kevin Von Erich.
yeah,
Kevin Von Erich is the focal point of the movie because Kevin Von Erich is the one who survived.
yeah.
The
Kevin, yeah. The story is about the curse. Make no mistake about it. It's not about Kevin Von Erich. It's about the family. It's not just about him. It was never just about him. He's who the movie focuses on because, like you said, he's the one who survived. I
you need
and
someone to root for.
yeah, and
The I don't think it's about the curse. I think it's about fatherhood and what a parent that strives for that level, for that mentality, psychologically does on their children.
yeah,
The Von Erich curses again is just a backdrop for that, and I think that's what makes it work. The movie could have easily been Kevin Von Erich's career through this perspective of the lady from Baby Driver.
yeah. It could have
Lily
easily been like
James, I
that.
think, is her name.
Yeah, Lily James.
But it wasn't because
No,
that was never close to the story, because the story is not about Kevin.
no. It's about all of them, really, realistically. Like that's the thing. Like up until but make no mistake about it. Zac Efron is fantastic, and he absolutely delivers. And I think there's two scenes to stand out to me when I think about that. And trigger warning, because I am going to go into detail about a suicide when I talk about this. Kerry Von Erich's suicide and Zac Efron's performance, the camera movement, the emotion behind it is just absolutely phenomenal filmmaking. It shouldn't be in a movie about pro wrestling. It just shouldn't be. But everything about that scene, the way it's presented, the grief, the immediate reaction, the anger, just the way Kevin goes through 5 or 6 of different emotions in the span of 30 seconds in one long take is just fantastic. And then for me, the other scene is the closing scene of the movie where Kevin's kids ask him why he's crying. And he explains it's just such a gut punch of a scene. And both
I
of them
guess it's
are.
because I used to be a brother and I'm not a brother anymore.
Yeah, it's just it's raw, it's brutal, and Efron absolutely nails it. And that's the thing, like that character. Yeah, you have to be able for in that role. He had to be able to convey grief and an unimaginable amount of grief for one person to have to go through, and he hit it out of the park. And that's
Yeah.
kind of and that kind of filmmaking is kind of says all you need to say about A24. They present these not as like these scenarios aren't like globally impactful things that are going to change the world like stories, but they present them as such in a
The
way that is unique, in my opinion.
and that's going to be my transition into their studio itself.
Yeah,
We can still discuss the movie a little bit because
yeah,
I'm gonna go through a bunch of supplement all of these with examples.
yeah.
But I don't know if people have noticed. There's kind of a cult following around A24.
Mm-hmm.
The Their mission originally was to give directors creative freedom, and to supplement it, they'd use untraditional marketing. So instead of using traditional marketing, they use online marketing, which has become traditional marketing. The To go into it, Durden had full creative control over Iron Claw, or
Yeah,
Durkin.
yeah.
Did I say Durden? I'm thinking of the guy from Fight Club. Character.
Yep. Don't talk about it. Can't talk about it. See, that's the problem with movies like that.
Edward
We can't.
Norton's better in Primal Fear anyway. There's my hot take for the show.
I think he's better in the Hulk. I'm gonna annoy people by saying that and not go into it any further. Continue, please.
Anyway, Durkin had full creative control, which, let's look at the directors that are synonymous with A24. Alex Garland, Civil War, Ex Machina, a couple other movies. Ty West, X, Pearl, Maxine. He cheated. The first movie, X, is shot like a 70s horror movie. The second movie, Pearl, which takes place 20 years, years and years before, not even 20, like 40, 50 to 50. The origin story for the main villain in X, spoiler if you haven't seen them, I'm sorry, takes place, and it's shot like something out of the 1920s, just with color. And then the next movie that directly follows the events of X, that takes place in the 80s, is shot like an 80s B movie, which makes each movie in the trilogy feel different, even with the same characters, same plot line, same lead actress, all that. But let's look at Greta Gerwig, Lady Bird. I feel like there was another one I'm missing. Ari Aster, Beau is Afraid, Hereditary. He's got a couple others. He has another one coming up for A24.
Talk to me. They let the Raka just do whatever they wanted. If you
I'm
watch the
going
beginning,
somewhere. I'm going somewhere specific with this list of names.
okay, fine. Sorry, I was just
Um,
trying to help.
Robert Eggers, did The Lighthouse. I feel like he did. I feel like he did 3 or 4. Well, let me look that up because um, The Witch was A24. So yeah, he's done multiple. The Northman was not. I don't think. I think Northman was a square peg. Regardless, the Bo Burnham, the Safdie brothers, the people that were doing the Smashing Machine, they did Uncut Gems before. Um, they they're kind of launching all of these renowned directors, the most renowned young directors up and coming. Some of them have already bounced away from A24 and into big studio work. Greta Gerwig, the biggest of what I mentioned, just did Barbie last year. That's not A24, but she didn't get her directorial break and get out of acting to do directorial work until Ridley Ladybird. Back in the early 70s, late 80s, there was I said early 70s, late 60s, I should say. I'm gonna give you a list of names, Corey.
Yeah.
Unrelated to A24, just a list of names. Robert Altman, Woody Allen, Martin Scorsese, Peter Bogdanovich, John Avildsen, John Carpenter, Francis Ford Coppola, Brian De Palma, Milos Forman, Steven Spielberg, William Friedkin, George Lucas, David Lynch, Roman Polanski. Ew, screw that guy. But he made some of the biggest movies of all time. Sidney Pollack, George Romero, Mel Brooks. Okay, I thought I could get to 20 here, but I'm clearly forgetting about certain other big names. Peter Yates. I got to 18. That's pretty good. The John Cassavetes. Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick's the obvious one. I don't know how I missed Kubrick. I just listed 20 names. 20 of the biggest directors in the history of Hollywood. That was called New Hollywood. People were tired of the big budget studio movies. Independent auteur movie people start creating their own movies on small budgets. Those small budgets brought back big returns, and then they became big budgets over time. The names I previously mentioned is the spiritual successor to that. Now, that's not to say that the Safdie brothers are going to be the next Robert Altman, or the next Martin Scorsese, or the next John Cassavetes, or the next Steven Spielberg, or whatever names I mentioned, Peter Bogdanovich. Like, I realize Brian De Palma, David Lynch, George Lucas, these are some of the biggest movie creators of all time.
Yeah.
I realize we might not be seeing the spirit. We will never see somebody with the brain of William Friedkin again, but we're gonna see somebody with the new brain, new ideas, new concepts that can be just as innovative in different ways.
Yeah.
That's what these guys are. They're building the modern new Hollywood. Take Civil War, for example, Alex Garland.
Yeah.
That movie had the biggest budget in the history of A24. It had the second biggest box office in the history of A24. I'm going to pull up their box office numbers right now because I thought I had that written down, and I did not. So, Civil War brought back $121 million at the box office on a $50 million budget.
Yeah.
It was profitable.
Double,
especially with their marketing strategies. They don't spend nearly as much on marketing as everybody else.
No, there wasn't a lot of marketing from that movie in general, but it was kind of like, I feel like the marketing on that movie was severely hampered. by what's going on in the US right now. They didn't want to like
Civil
stoke the
War.
flames. Yeah.
Civil War is the quintessential A24 movie, and it fits my example because it goes through the grief that, why can't I think of her name? Jesse Plemons' wife, chick from Spider-Man movies,
Kirsten Dunst.
Kirsten Dunst. Thank you. I love Kirsten Dunst. I don't know why I blanked on her name. That Kirsten Dunst goes through as a photojournalist, and what Katie Spaney's going to have to learn to swallow the horror you see through the job. So instead of making a big time war epic, which has been done before, which everybody's seen, you're not going to make the next Deer Hunter. You're not going to make the next Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you mean, but like that's kind of a testament to what A24 do. Everything that they do is different. It's not the industry standard. It's refreshing. It's unique. It doesn't matter what what the plot is. It's a unique spin on it. I feel like, at least for me, with the movies that I've seen from A24, it's a very unique spin. Even when it's a factual story, there's a unique spin to it.
But the spin has to be right. In
Yeah.
a war movie, you never hear about the journalists covering it and
No.
what they go through. And that was the allure of the movie, is the grief that these people have to endure for a living, is the allure of the movie. But it felt like a bigger budget than it was because it uses traditional special effects. It keeps the budget low with bigger returns. And these aren't necessarily high returns. Look at the Ty West trilogy budget. The X was $2 million of a budget.
Yeah.
It made $44 million at the box office, if I'm looking at the numbers right. Pearl, which came out a month later, had a budget of $1 million, made $10.1 billion at the box office. X made $15 million at the box office. Either way, on both had budgets of $1 million. So that brought back $25 million on a $2 million budget. Did not feel low budget because of how true Ty West's filmmaking was. And that's some of the lowest budgets you'll see. Maxine saw a budget bump a little bit, but not by much, brought back $20 million. So they spent $5 million on this movie, on on this trilogy, made $45 million, which is probably what I was looking at with the first number I said. They more than doubled their returns. That doesn't sound like a lot of money, but
in the grand scheme of the box office, it doesn't.
Talk to Me had $4.5 million budget, made $92 million at the box office. Everything Everywhere All at Once had a $14 million budget, made $145 million at the box office. Moonlight had a budget of $1 million, made $65 million at the box office. Uncut Gems had a budget of $19 million, made $50 million at the box office.
And that went to Netflix very quickly, didn't it?
When you keep the budgets that low, and you consistently see every movie you make break at least break even, you're going to make money.
Yeah.
So but another thing is, the original, up until Moonlight, they didn't make their movies; they distributed them.
Yeah.
So Spring Breakers, for example, they didn't produce Spring Break. They bought it for cheap, distributed it, made money at the box office. Didn't make much, but they knew exactly what the allure of the movie was. It worked. It was the first movie to ever use a 100% social media campaign.
Yeah.
They then went even deeper into that with Civil War. Not Civil War, Ex Machina. Same director, my bad. Do you know what they did for the marketing of Ex Machina, Corey?
I can't quite remember it.
Do you know the premise of Ex Machina?
Yeah, I know the AI. Yeah.
Oh, you've seen Ex Machina, haven't you?
Yeah, I have seen that.
So
I just don't remember
he falls in love with the robot in the movie. Dating AI is kind of the concept. and AI becoming somebody who who
Feels.
it discovers the concept of emotion. Um,
Sounds like a
they
really
made a
bad
Tinder
reboot.
account for the girl in Ex Machina, and whenever you swiped right, it took you directly to the movie and
Yeah.
where to buy tickets, the premise, all that. So they made a Tinder profile for it, and then whenever a guy swiped on it, he got forwarded information about the movie.
Yeah.
That is brilliant,
Hmm. Definitely unique.
and it costs no money at all. And horny dudes is like the ultimate demographic that's gonna
Yeah.
spend money. Like these concepts for how they market, not change the industry. And now, but another thing is, they know exactly once these movies took off, they made people identify with the brand. Nobody's going to see Bad Boys 4 because Sony Pictures released it.
Yeah.
They're going to see Bad Boys 4 because they like Will Smith and they
And
like
Martin
those
Lawrence.
movies. I'm sorry?
And Martin Lawrence. Don't forget him.
Martin Lawrence too, of course, but let's be honest, that's a Will Smith vehicle more than anything else. And he is a bigger box office draw.
Yeah.
Martin Lawrence is great in those movies. Martin Lawrence had my favorite performance of the new Bad Boys. So I'm
Hmm.
not criticizing Martin Lawrence. I'm just saying, if I had to guess, the average person goes to see Bad Boys because, oh, those are the new Will Smith movies. People, what's a better example? You said it earlier with The Rock. People go to see San Andreas because it's a new Rock action movie,
Yeah.
not
It's
because of who created the movie, who's directing the movie, who created the movie. The idea people will go to see The Fall Guy because it's Ryan Gosling. People will go to see um I'm blanking on examples, but you know what I mean. People are going to go
star power.
see the F1 movie next year, not because it's a movie about F1 racing. They're going to see it because it's Brad Pitt.
I disagree with you on that, but that's a different topic for another time. Uh,
They're
my
not going to get 500 million at the box office to even break even solely because there's an F1 movie. I'm sorry.
I think you're underestimating how worldwide the love of Formula One is. But that's another topic. But I get what you're saying.
People are going to go see Wolves because it's George Clooney and Brad
Yeah,
Pitt.
yeah, I agree with you.
The
There's a certain amount of star power that's needed to sell a lot of movies, but I
But
don't feel like
A24 doesn't have that. They bring stars in for their movies. But I went to eighth grade a re-release showing of One Night Only of eighth grade last night. Everybody in the theaters, except for me, was wearing an A24 hat and an A24 shirt. Their jackets. They have their own subscription service, which now has their own lottery tickets that you can win big on. They make more money in the studio's merchandise than they do from singular movies.
yeah,
People have every movie people see are critically acclaimed. This isn't to say they don't have their sninkers. I'm thinking specifically of the Adderall Diaries, Marcel, the shows with shoes on.
hmm
On the Rocks was only okay, but Rashida Jones, actually, On the Rocks is a perfect example of this. The They have their stinkers, and their movies aren't the best movie you've ever seen. Not every movie's going to be Room. Not every movie's going to be The Whale. Not every movie's going to be The Iron Claw
hmm
or X or The Lighthouse or I'm just listing movies at this point.
yeah.
It's not every movie's going to be The Last Black Man in San Francisco or First Reformed or Come On, Come On. But the idea that they don't have their stinkers is wrong.
Oh, they definitely do have their stinkers. You can as you mentioned, you can kind of excuse Spring Breakers as they didn't make the movie; they just distributed
It
it.
was also their first, so they were trying to find footing and they get whatever you can get your hands on.
I don't think Priscilla was as good as it was critiqued to be. That's a movie that stands out for me as a bit overhyped because of A24.
Of the 45 A24 movies I've seen, I have that ranked at 37th.
Yeah,
So
it's
clearly I agree. But I'm going to use a movie like On the Rocks, for example. You haven't heard of it, have you?
no.
Rashida Jones, Karen from The Office, Bill Murray. That's a pretty big 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
For a movie you haven't heard of that came out in a time where movies weren't where there wasn't a lot of movies being made, so it was easier to make noise. They have their stinkers, but they also have a deal with Apple TV to produce movies. They
Yeah.
put the movies that don't get good critical analysis from critics as part of that deal. So the only movies that go directly to Apple TV for Apple TV Originals produced by A24 are On the Rocks. Sharper.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoy Sharper. I thought it was an excellent movie, but it wasn't overly critically loved. So that went to Apple TV Plus. So people in their mind compartmentalize that as an Apple original and not A24. They do the same with certain movies with Paramount and the other streaming services they have deals for. There's a certain thing with streaming where you kind of view it with the streaming service versus the movie. Like Euphoria is A24, but if you mention Euphoria to anybody, even A24 fans, they think of HBO Max.
Yeah.
Beef on Netflix. Oh, that Netflix show. Nobody says that A24 show.
Yeah.
So the idea that they don't have their stinkers is wrong, but they've done a great job hiding their stinkers from theatrical releases.
Yeah.
So that every A24 movie people go see in theaters is on par with the other A24 movies they see.
Yeah.
So between that and the one other thing they've done that is really good, or two other things. I have two other things. They have re-releases. We went over this 2 weeks ago in the box office episode. I'm going to gloss over it. A24 is doing right now I went to 8th grade last night.
Yeah.
The Teenage Dream series. So for this month only, there are 4 movies. 8th grade, mid-90s for people in the States. Wednesday, 7 o'clock, your local theater, AMC. The Bling Ring and Talk to Me. All in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to Me is on the same night as the IMAX release of Everything Everywhere All at Once, which they're doing once a month of different movies. So far, they've done Hereditary, Midsommar, Uncut Gems, Ex Machina, and the Oasis documentary. And then they're doing Everything Everywhere All at Once this month. And this week, we should have another announcement of what the next 2 months are going to be.
Yeah.
Their main competition is themselves with re-releases. And we are in an era of streaming where people wait for streaming because they need to make sure it is worth their money. And then when they wait for streaming, they'll often say, man, I wish I saw that in theaters. This gives them the opportunity to do that. And in a time where studios are still reeling from a strike, so they didn't have time to make as many movies. So not only are they supplementing, they're creating a new way of movie going and ushering it in and finding their footing as an indie studio before the big studios themselves, Warner Bros., Sony, Paramount, Universal, all find their footing in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Do you know how important it is for an independent studio to be ahead on the trends?
Very.
What are your thoughts on some of these things before we wrap up on some of these things that we've gone through with how the studio has found a way to stand out?
Like that's the thing with, and you mentioned it a lot. Grief is a very focal point of a lot of these movies, and that's the thing that you want to do with your audience. You want to connect with your audience through what you're producing in your movies, and that's the thing. Grief is the one thing that everyone on this planet will experience at one time or another, and it's a very raw emotion. So it's very, very important to have it in your movies. And Ladybird for me is an A24 movie that stands out. Lock is another one. Lock is for a different reason though, because it's solely just Tom Hardy in a car taking phone calls. It's all the movie is. and
Oh,
it's a
that sounds
very
awesome.
it that's all it is. That's the entire plot of the movie. It's Tom Hardy driving home from work and taking calls, and his night gets worse and worse as the night goes. That's all it is. And Lady Bird is a very simple movie as well. It's about a girl trying to find her place in the world as she grows up, as she's leaving high school, and is, as you said, talking about leaving home and the struggles of that, seeing what's happening with her parents and what's happening with her sibling and so on and so forth. Like it's just one of those movies. Like, and I do want to mention about their horrors. Their horrors are very unique. I think Hereditary is one of those horror movies that you kind of come out of thinking, Jesus H. Christ, what did I just watch? Talk to Me is another one where they did a lot of practical stuff. There's not a lot of CGI in
Right.
Talk to Me, which is surprising considering Racker, the directors and the brainchild behind that project. Midsommar is deeply unsettling if you've watched it. If you watch that movie, it's not even close to being a traditional horror. It's
The
so
cliff
unsettling.
scene,
The entire movie is unsettling. The entire movie, when
the
her boyfriend is
the
killed,
scene when he finally cheats on her.
yeah, that is just like everything about all of that is just deeply unsettling, and it ends on an even more morbid note where her joining the community and seemingly just being completely happy with everything that she just witnessed. Like, and that's what grief can do to a person as well. Grief can just make you just, and that's kind of the narrative of that movie. Grief can make you vulnerable to these kind of people who will prey on that, and that's a theme that you don't see a lot of in today's cinema. Like a lot of movies don't want to go there.
I do worry that that's going to change after the recent releases. I'm going to use We Live in Time for example.
Mm,
Looks like a pretty straightforward rom
yeah,
com. The upcoming A24 Florence Pugh. Speaking of the lady from Midsommar, Florence Pugh and Andrew
Andrew
Garfield.
Garfield. That should be fun.
The I'm kind of worried, and I'm not going to get into the politics of the person,
Yeah,
even though I'm not a fan. But did you see who their new financial backer is?
I have not seen because I've not been. I'm not in the loop in that regard, but like, hit
So
me with who it is.
the A24 in June landed an investment led by Thrive Capital. Capital.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the and appointed their Thrive Capital CEO to their board of directors.
And who's
Thrive
that?
Capital is run by Josh Kushner, the
Oh, okay,
brother of the son-in-law of the former president of the United States.
fantastic.
So the idea, a lot of movies like Moonlight, a lot of movies like Tuesday or
Lady Bird.
um, Lady Bird,
Lady
uh,
Bird would have
The
been cut.
Whale, The Whale, all of these movies that we've grown accustomed to them putting out. Love Lies Bleeding for another example from this
Yeah,
year. Um, those would be considered woke.
I just and before we do
So
wrap
I
up
wonder
though,
if we're going to see a change in the policy, like to more apolitical traditional studio movies
yeah,
because of who funds the studio now.
yeah. I I just want to say one more thing about Ladybird and kind of the direction for it because it's something that I wanted to talk about today at some point, but we haven't really gotten around to more the like the bare bones of each of the movies. But for me, Ladybird's direction stands out, and it stands out never more so than the opening scene,
Greta
and that
Gerwig's so good, man.
and it's something that like they call back to later in the movie when she leaves her voicemail and she talks about how she drives around. But at the start of the movie, when she's driving around with her mom, it drives her so insane that she jumps out of a moving vehicle. Also, the way that shot is from the hood of the car through the windshield, and then the camera doesn't even move with Saoirse Ronan when she dives out of the car. I love that scene. That's one of my favorite scenes in cinema in general, really, because it's just how it's directed, how it's presented, how it's acted. But I just wanted to mention that really quickly. But before we do finish up, I do want to make a suggestion for next week's episode right here and now, and I want to ask you if you'd think about it. I, I
And now I can't say no.
no, you can say no if you want, and we can come up with something else in the meantime. But just in case people want to know what we're doing next, if they manage to make it to the end,
How can they're gonna know what I know? That's not fair to me.
I was just thinking
No,
because
they're better than me anyway. It's fine.
Deadpool and Wolverine, Inside Out 2 were two recent examples of movies hitting the $1 billion mark worldwide. And they did it pretty easily. So I kind of want to go. I kind of want to do an episode where we discuss. It's not a long list of movies that have made $1 billion in the box. Yeah, $1 billion
go
movies.
900 million and more. Let's
900 million
out a little bit.
And then we can kind of maybe compare the 900 million ish to the ones that did cross $1 billion and see what the significant differences are.
This means I have to watch Avatar 2 now.
It's all right. It's not great.
That's like 4 hours, and I didn't even care for the first one.
Yeah, well, I just thought of it because, like I said, there's been a couple of $1 billion movies over the last few months, and to be fair, I want another excuse to talk about Deadpool and Wolverine. I'll be honest. That movie was awesome.
Anyway, upcoming A24 projects include The Smashing Machine in December. Yeah. We Live in Time. Hold on, let me just Google upcoming A24 films. They have a lot of upcoming stuff.
We do our research here, just on air.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to sign off here before you go on another Hugh Jackman rant.
I'm not going on a Hugh Jackman.
Not the Hugh Jackman rules. I'm not trying to. Arya Starr has an upcoming movie called Eddington that's currently filming, starring Emma Stone, Austin Butler, Pedro Pascal, and Joaquin Phoenix. Of course, Joaquin Phoenix worked with Arya Starr and A24 and Beau is Afraid. We have Parthenope later this year. That's looks to be a foreign film. We have Huntington coming up. Glenn Powell, Mark Hawley, and Ed Harris. Ed Harris was in the Love Lies Bleeding for A24 earlier this year. Got a theatrical release. We have Eternity, starring Miles Teller, Elizabeth Olsen, Callum Taylor, and her first project after winning the Oscar, Divine Randolph. She's fantastic. Very, very underrated. We have an upcoming Paul Rudd, Jenna Ortega movie. Of course, Jenna Ortega worked with them for X, Death of a Unicorn. So they have a couple things coming up. Today they announced a movie with Zendaya.
Yeah.
They announced her co-star too. Let me look at that real quick. I kind of just glossed over that. Regardless, a lot of big projects coming up with a lot of interesting names.
Yeah.
So be sure to go see that. Sing Sing comes out soon. Like I said, the last couple episodes, Coleman Domingo's frontrunner for best actor now. Must go see that. Will tug on your heartstrings. A lot going on. I'm going to go ahead and do my Jeff Jarrett style, like you said last week, Twitter handle. Jeff Jarrett star, supporting cast Juice Pastor for like 2 minutes. First A24 film, Spring Breakers. Ain't he great? Don't laugh at me, you slap nuts.
I kind of have to laugh through the pain.
Okay, so that's the Jameis. That's T as in Tuesday. H is in Hereditary. E as in Ex Machina. J as in Janet Planet. A as in Adderall Diaries. M as in Midsommar. E as in Everything Everywhere All at Once. U as in Uncut Gems. And S as in Sharper. Notice those are all A24 movies I used this week.
All right, guys, we're going to be out now. But if you are new, make sure to subscribe, like, and we'll see you next week for $1 billion movies. See you guys next time.